Welcome to episode 19 of the Wisdom from the Akasha podcast. My name is Susie. I'm your host. I'm an Akashic Records teacher and practitioner. In last week's episode, I talked a lot about 3D, 4D, and 5D, terms that you will hear a lot in the spiritual community, especially in the New Age side of things. And I want to carry that conversation on a little bit today in respect of timelines and splitting timelines. Before I get into this conversation and how it's viewed from the Akashic Records perspective, I do want to caveat this with saying that we're going to be talking about different timelines and how it all works today. What I don't want anybody to do is sit there and panic and say, oh, but I still have work to do. Okay, I see a lot of very dangerous fearmongering out there on the internet with people saying if you're not evolved or if you haven't done your inner child work or if you're not ready for this higher timeline, then by this certain date, then you're going to be left behind. This is not how it works. There is no set date period in our timeline that everything has to be done by. The conditions of consciousness that we are experiencing at the moment are for the work of evolution. They are for the process of doing our healing, letting go of our energetic stagnation. But this process of ascending, this process of strengthening and building the light body is a process that takes many lifetimes. I say this because I think it's a very dangerous thing for people to start saying, well, there's this timeline or there's this timeline. And if you're not on this timeline by this date, then you're going to be left behind. People worry about themselves. They worry about their family members. So before I talk about how multiple timelines work and how this works from the perspective of the Akashic Records, I just want to say that from the very outset, your soul's evolution is very individual and unique to you, just as your family members' soul evolution is very unique and individual to them. So please don't ever think, okay, well, my partner, my parent, they haven't had a spiritual awakening in this lifetime, therefore they're going to be left behind. That isn't how it works. I just wanted to get that out there first. The conversation around timelines comes up not only when we're talking about the different levels of consciousness that are experienced on Earth at this time, but also in respect of when people ask me, is it destiny or is it free will? And the answer to this question is that it's both. Let me explain. Your soul comes into an incarnation and it has certain situations, certain soul contracts, certain themes that it wants to experience during an incarnation. This is what is inputted into your soul blueprint. So before the soul comes into the incarnation, it sits with your guide team, with your soul family, and says, right, these are the things that I want to experience. So this is where we get this idea of something being destined or something being fated. Now, on the other side, we do have free will here on Earth. And the free will element comes in respect of, okay, well, how am I going to deal with? How am I going to respond to certain situations? How quickly am I going to learn these lessons, grow and evolve? So there actually comes a point on the spiritual journey where somebody has been through the majority of those things that they have signed up for in that soul blueprint. They have experienced certain karmic relationships, they have learned certain lessons, and they have evolved past that point of the destined things being relevant. In those cases, what they are doing is they are consciously co-creating their life moving forward. That information is still in their soul blueprint, but they have moved much more into the level of being free will dominant. Equally, there are certain people, depending on their level of consciousness, who are still going through the stuff that is destined or fated. This is one of the reasons that things like astrology can be very helpful in understanding yourself, because by choosing to incarnate under specific planetary forces, You are choosing to connect to certain archetypal energy, and certain ways of those planetary forces moving is going to then affect you if you are in a certain archetypal energy. This is the interaction between your soul's blueprint and the cosmos. Another way to think of this is that your soul's evolution, your journey of evolving as a conscious being, is moving from a destiny dominant position to a more free will dominant position. It's not that when things are destined to happen or fated to happen that you don't have free will, it's just one is more dominant than the other. When, for example, you go for a psychic reading, an intuitive tarot reading, what that individual is doing is they are tuning into their internal guidance system, and they're tuning into the information and the energy that you're providing them with. Now, there comes a point in your own soul's evolution where it can be very difficult for a psychic and intuitive tarot reader, whichever, to be able to tune into your energy because there are more potential future timelines available to you. Most psychics and intuitives will agree that you can only start tuning into a timeline, a future timeline, when it's about a 70% likelihood of actually materializing. When you're in that level of consciousness where you're destiny dominant, you are going to have a much clearer future timeline for the psychic or the intuitive to tune into to provide you then with that information. When you move to a more free will dominant position, it's going to be much harder for the psychic or the intuitive to actually tune into that. And quite honestly, when someone's at the level of consciousness where they have become more free will dominant, they tend to have very little interest in seeing psychics and intuitives in respect of what their future timelines hold, because they are more interested in the activity of co-creation. From the perspective of the Akashic Records, there is an element of future timelines, and if you come and train with me, we cover future timelines in the training a little. You can ask questions about certain future timelines, but it's more focused on what does this person, this individual need to know to get them aligned to their highest timeline. And the highest timeline just means the timeline in which you are living in true soul alignment. Because the Akashic Records is this focus on this objective soul level perspective, it's not so much about will I ever get married? Will I ever have children? Because at some point in some lifetime, in some timeline, the answer is yes, and also the answer is no. We have to understand that when we get into fifth dimension and above, you're very much looking at all of these potential timelines there. And it's about, okay, what do I need to do to get from where I am today into that fuller soul alignment? You can, of course, understand certain things that are in your soul blueprint. So why do I constantly procrastinate? Why do I self-sabotage? That information is in there, but it's not the predictive nature that you would find in an intuitive psychic or tarot reading. You will hear a lot in the New Age community this 3D and 5D timelines, that there's this splitting of worlds happening. This is an idea that I think was really pushed and brought forward by Dolores Cannon. And the problem with this conversation is that it doesn't talk about how this process works from an esoteric perspective. I will do a podcast episode at some point, no doubt, talking about how this works from a more esoteric perspective. But this idea of there being these two worlds and it's going to happen in 6 months' time from now, and if your family aren't on their spiritual awakening journey, that you're going to leave them behind and be on a different planet, it just doesn't work like that. Now, what happens is, of course, souls evolve and Earth herself evolves. Earth is a conscious being and she is going through her evolutionary process, and she is on track for spiritualization, as we've talked about in previous podcast episodes. But the way that it's portrayed in the New Age community a lot of the times is it's putting a lot of fear into people, and I don't want anyone to be fearful of this process. Souls evolving, Earth evolving is exactly what we signed up for whilst we came down here, and there isn't this date for things to be done by. Understanding of how souls evolve and how the cosmos evolves is very prevalent in all esoteric traditions. All esoteric traditions have a cosmology, and all spiritual systems have a cosmology. But to understand how the process works, you have to understand the cosmology. Each esoteric system and path has their own cosmology. So depending upon which path and practice you are drawn to working with will depend upon the cosmology that you are familiar with. As I mentioned last week, all of the dimensions exist on top of each other. You can be on planet Earth at this moment in time experiencing the 5th dimensional level of consciousness right now. Your responsibility is your own soul's evolution. That's all you're responsible for. You're working on your own soul's evolution, and really getting into alignment to your soul is your job here on Earth, regardless of all the other jobs that you probably have here on Earth. And that in turn affects the collective level of consciousness. I know it can be disheartening when you see the chaos that is out there in this world, and you can think, well, what does it matter? The work that I'm doing, why bother? But I promise you that all of the work that each of you are doing on yourselves, all of the healing, all of the integration, all of the letting go is worth it because it helps the collective. So what does all of this have to do with timelines, our topic for today? Many different timelines available to you as a conscious being, and there are many different timelines available for Earth as a conscious being. Now, we as humans, being part of Earth in this lifetime, regardless of where else your soul may have been, under the influences of 2 streams of consciousness. One is an evolutionary stream of consciousness, and one is a devolutionary stream of consciousness. So one of these streams is designed to help you grow, to help you expand, to help you really live in alignment with your soul. The other stream of consciousness is designed to hinder that process, to take you away from that process, to help you get really attached to the materialistic aspect of Earth and everything that Earth has to offer. Our job as conscious beings is to choose every single day, am I going to align to the evolutionary timeline, or am I going to align to the devolutionary timeline? Now, this is an important conversation because a lot of people who are incarnated at this time on Earth are people who have lived in previous times on Earth, which in the anthroposophical system would have been known as the Lemurian and the Atlantean epochs. These were times of prior civilizations of humans which destroyed themselves. This process of evolution and devolution is something that a soul consciously chooses, and it chooses it over many, many lifetimes. I don't want you to sit there and think, okay, well, I had 5 years where I was really selfish. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was extremely self-centered. I didn't do any spiritual stuff. Therefore, I'm doomed. Therefore, I'm on the devolutionary timeline. It doesn't work like that. We are consciously connecting 2 timelines throughout our many incarnations that we will have. Our job is to decide, am I going to tune into and work with the evolutionary timeline, or am I going to allow myself to devolve? All of you who are listening to this podcast are on their consciousness journey. You're on the evolutionary timeline, because otherwise you wouldn't be listening to a podcast about the Akashic Records. This doesn't mean that someone who hasn't chosen a spiritual awakening or spiritual development in this lifetime is on the devolutionary timeline. Okay? It may be that they haven't chosen to have a spiritual awakening this lifetime because they did a lot of spiritual development in a previous incarnation. It may be that there is some karma that they have to resolve in this lifetime. So they're going to have their spiritual awakening and spiritual development in their next lifetime. You can never judge someone else's position because each soul's path is so individual and unique to them. Again, please don't worry if you think my partner, my family, they haven't been through a spiritual awakening. They're still going through moving from victim consciousness into a higher level of consciousness. Don't panic. It's not that they're choosing this devolutionary timeline and that they're all hope is lost. It doesn't work like that. Souls and souls evolution is a very complex topic, so I'm trying to make this as straightforward as possible, but in a way that takes any fears that any of you may have if you've seen this stuff on social media and you're worried about yourself or your family members. As I noted earlier, a lot of the souls here are essentially reliving the experiences that they had in the times of Lemuria and Atlantis to neutralize karma, to go through certain karmic connections and soul contracts with people, but they are going to experience this free will choice of, am I going to evolve or am I going to devolve? Am I going to choose connection to my organic development, my evolution of my consciousness, or am I going to go on the devolutionary side, which will involve a more external expression of consciousness, so expecting outside events to evolve me and not doing the inner work. This time is all about the inner work, not sitting at the feet of a guru, doing the inner work and evolving for ourselves. The devolutionary timeline looks more like planting chips in your head so that you have more knowledge. It looks more like changing the biological form of a human to become more machine-like, to become more transhumanist. The devolutionary timeline is more aligned to the transhumanist movement. As I'm recording this episode, as soon as I said that last sentence about the devolutionary timeline being more aligned to transhumanism, my computer just completely crashes. So I'm glad that it has saved the podcast episode, but it just made me laugh because the next thing that I was going to say is the devolutionary timeline is giving our power away to external forces, giving our power away to AI, to machines. In the astral workshops that I'm covering in the membership, I'm going to talk specifically about the connection between the astral and AI. So if this type of stuff is something that is of interest to you, definitely think about joining that. But for now, we just need to understand that we are going to have this choice presented to us multiple times over multiple incarnations of, am I going to align with the conscious organic evolution of my soul and with planet Earth herself, or am I going to align to this devolutionary timeline? You have free will, but you're going to be influenced by energies, by beings that are both on the evolutionary timeline and on the devolutionary timeline. And this is why myself and others are constantly reminding you that training your discernment, knowing what is in alignment with your soul is so important at this time. Those of you who have past life memories of your time in Lemuria and your time in Atlantis, you may very well recognize some of these themes and this evolutionary and devolutionary consciousness, because this is very much the decisions that we were making as souls in those times as well, especially in the Atlantean times. Let's take a look at what the evolutionary timeline and what the devolutionary timeline look and feel like so that you can feel in for yourself. What I would like you all to do is feel into your day, your week, your month, and ask yourself, how much of my time am I spending connecting to the evolutionary and how much time am I spending connecting to the devolutionary. Okay, we cannot escape the fact that we live in a modern age and that we are going to have to use technology. We're going to have to be involved with things like AI, but we can make conscious choices to ensure that we are balancing ourselves in favor of the evolutionary timeline and not the devolutionary timeline. So the evolutionary timeline is all about our expansion of our consciousness, our integration, and our alignment to our soul, our higher self. And this does involve a purification process of that lower self, of that egoic self, that lower chakra dominant self. This purification doesn't mean that you stop enjoying life, that you abandon everything that you are. It just means that we become very consciously aware of our programming, of our conditioning, and we do our work. So we do our shadow work, we do our inner child work, anything that we know that needs doing, we do that. Now, this can be painful and it can be difficult, but this is still part of that evolutionary timeline, because every time you heal something, you are making more space in that light grid, you are integrating more of your soul in, and you are moving forward with your expansion and your alignment. It is very much living from the heart, living from a place and a resonant frequency of complete unconditional love. The most important thing to remember here is that you're going to see a lot of practices out there which are all about working with the higher chakras, activating your Merkaba, doing all of this stuff. But in reality, a lot of the time, this is spiritual bypassing and this is escapism. Okay? If you aren't dealing with the lower primary chakras and what is stored in there, and you're not moving through that, you can work on opening your third eye all you want, but is it going to benefit you, and is it going to benefit your soul's evolution, or is it time to take a look at the inner work that needs doing and just be honest with yourself, take your time, be patient, be kind to yourself through the process? Because nothing external to you is going to do the work for you in this time. It isn't how consciousness evolves in our time, and we have to accept that. It's completely normal on your spiritual journey to go through a stage of spiritual bypassing and avoiding looking at things that you know need work. But if you are serious that you want to really align to this evolutionary timeline, then you have to do the work. You can find people to help you through this work, and there are many beautiful tools and practices and teachers out there who will help you on this, but ultimately the responsibility is yours. To be able to live from the frequency of unconditional love, practices such as non-judgment, non-attachment, paying attention to when you're judging or you're being critical can be very helpful. Being very gentle and patient and kind with yourself is essential. And also being really clear about what is coming up in the emotional body, what emotions are coming up, and do you have methods to transmute those emotions, or are you still repressing those emotions? And also the mental body. So the emotional body is level 2 of the light grid, the mental body is level 3 of the light grid. And when you're looking to connect to the 4th primary chakra, the heart chakra, the condition of the 3 layers beneath is very important. Understanding what your thought process is like, understanding which of those thought bubbles that I've talked about before you're connecting into, and just being very honest, being very self-reflective, very self-observant. On the other side of things, the devolutionary timeline is all about fear, about giving your power away, about no freedom. It's all about other people being in control of you, other people controlling your emotions, other people controlling your thoughts. And of course, with this, we also have the AI aspect and the transhumanistic aspect. In your self-reflection practice, you really want to consider, where am I giving my power away? where is my attention most of the time? Is it being influenced by algorithms? Am I being influenced by the opinions of others? Am I holding myself back from living a life of alignment because I fear other people's judgment, because I fear what people are going to say? Really being honest with where you are giving your power away. If somebody else, whether it's a family member, a friend, a partner, has the ability to make you angry, then you are giving your power away. If they have the ability to upset your state of being in the present moment, then you're giving your power away. Every day throughout our lives, we are under influences from both the evolutionary and the devolutionary side. We have to be aware of that, and we have to take that radical self-responsibility that I talk about to really deal with the inner work and to allow ourselves time and practices to help us connect into unconditional love, into the heart chakra as much as we possibly can. This does not mean you have to spend 10 hours a day meditating or anything like that, but giving yourself the opportunity throughout the day to check in with yourself. How are my emotions? How is my state of mind at this moment in time? And just having little practices to really observe yourself and then put yourself into that frequency of unconditional love will be really beneficial. In our current times that we are experiencing, our job is to evolve. Our job is to really look at what is keeping us from not being aligned to our soul, to our highest timeline, taking responsibility for that and moving forward. Doesn't mean we're not going to feel the influences of the evolutionary and the devolutionary. It just means that we have to take responsibility for those conscious decisions that we are making. I hope that this episode has given you a better understanding in respect of timelines and how these are, and the evolutionary and devolutionary influences that you may be feeling. In August 2024, I am going to be hosting a Soul Purpose Alignment Masterclass, and this is really going to be geared to those of you who want to get really clear on your soul's purpose, which is going to change many times throughout your incarnation. But getting clear on what that is, what your focus is right now, and how to move forward in that way. It's really about living a soul-aligned life and how to know when you are and how to know when you are not living in alignment to your soul. It's really going to be focused on you connecting to your soul and how to do that and how to receive guidance from it, so that you can build that relationship and that you can integrate more of your soul in to operate a soul-aligned life. If that is of interest for you, the details will be over on my website, so please just take a look and register over there. It's just going to be a one-off class where we're just going to do a deep dive into living in soul alignment. I would love to see you all there. I hope that you all have a restful and soul aligned weekend, and I will see you all next week for the next episode.